All right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. I am Austin Ullman. Today we're going to go through something that I believed was going to happen for a long time, and that's Conor McGregor and Jake Paul fighting. I think this fight will happen. It's going to happen in boxing, and I've been saying that for a long time. It just makes too much sense. Where with these two guys are in their career, a lot of people saying Jake Paul will never get that big fight. And he's continued to prove people wrong. I'll say he'll never beat a real boxer. He's continued to prove them wrong. Now, I'm not going to come on here and try to convince you that Jake Paul is an amazing boxer or a world title fight boxer. But I am going to convince you that Conor McGregor and Jake Paul will fight. And they're not just going to fight. This fight's going to happen within the next 2 years, I would guess. There's some really interesting things going on. And there's so much that goes within this fight because there's so many promotions that these guys are a part of. We'll talk about that. Obviously, Conor with the bare knuckle stuff going on, and so many sponsorship deals that these guys have that they want to promote. But there's enough comparison between these two, and there's enough they have in common, and a lot of that is money that we're going to talk about. That will be the reason that this fight happens. They already have bad blood. The UFC broadcast deal could play a major part in this, and the fact that they are not re-signing Conor McGregor and Conor McGregor is not re-signing with them. There's some really interesting things going on there. We're going to talk about that. It's clear that both these guys, I think, want to be active. Regardless of what people say about Conor, he had every intention of fighting on June 29th. I believe he had every intention of fighting last December. I fault the UFC for the fact that, well, for one, they haven't had him fight on 310 yet. I mean, that's a fight that they should have signed him to. They should have put him and Chandler on 310 and made it happen. But there's something very clear going on here. And Conor knows he can't wait forever. And then obviously the big promotions and the deals that these guys have. So let's start with the Jake Paul side of it. Where is Jake Paul in his career? So he started off with a YouTuber, then Nate Robinson, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley twice, Anderson Silva, lost to Tommy Fury, beat Nate Diaz, beat Andre August and Ryan Borland, the two amateur boxers, and then beat Mike Perry in his last fight. Now that's the interesting one, the Mike Perry thing. So for those of you who don't know, Mike Perry fights with BKFC, which is bare knuckle fighting, and Conor just became the co-owner of bare knuckle fighting. So Conor McGregor is currently the boss of Mike Perry, and he, before this fight happened, he was saying 100% Mike Perry's going to win, without a doubt. We're different here at bare knuckle, all these things. Now, by the way, I will say this, when it comes to boxing matches, and bare knuckle's been fine about it, obviously Mike Perry fought Jake Paul, could be an obstacle, because it seems like Conor wants to fight bare knuckle at some point, and it seems like he likely will, now that he's invested with them. But the Mike Perry thing is interesting, solely because you have a guy who got absolutely destroyed by Jake Paul, and then Conor was very against Mike Perry and said he cut from bare knuckle. Someone asked Conor a couple weeks ago, did you really cut him? And Conor said, well, have you seen him since? And we haven't. Now, I don't think he actually cut him. I don't think Conor has that ability to do that, especially if he's not going to be fighting for bare knuckle. Mike Perry's the best and most well-known bare knuckle fighter, so they can't be doing that. So there was a lot of bad blood between the two. Jake Paul said some nasty things about Conor McGregor and vice versa. But that was not the beginning of the bad blood between these two. This bad blood has been going on for a long time between these guys. And it's not going to stop. And obviously, both guys decide it's to promote and sell this fight. And to think otherwise would be silly. I mean, Jake Paul, obviously from his standpoint, is trying for this fight. There's no reason he would ever turn this fight down. Whether this fight happens or not is on Conor. And I don't think Conor's just been picking a beef with him for no reason. I think he is he's wanting this to happen. He's wanted it to happen for a while. And the reason I think it'll happen so soon is because of what's going on with Conor and the UFC. So just to finish on Jake Paul here, obviously the Tyson fight coming up, a lot of people saying, cancel this fight. I'm excited to see it. I hate to say it. I'm excited to see it. Obviously when the medical emergency came out with Tyson, Jackson and I both said, don't let the fight happen. But now I look at it, and I'm excited to see the fight. I'm excited to see what happens. But I think last night Mike Tyson was on Jimmy Kimmel and just had some more worrisome comments about the drugs he's on and different things like that. So, I mean, ideally, we get out of that event okay. 8 2-minute rounds. So, yeah. There's obviously bad blood there. We'll go to Conor, and obviously the story with Conor is the inactivity. Right, so when we look down, lost the last 2 to Poirier, obviously had the boxing fight with Floyd right there, which shows that obviously he's willing to take boxing fights, and that's something he's interested in. And by the way, I didn't even have this, but if this fight happens, Turkey's probably the one putting it on, and it probably happens in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Conor's starting to get very tight with those guys over there. We've seen that. He's been at all these events. And for Jake, obviously fought Tommy Fury, which was one of the first big events in Saudi Arabia. So if there's any reason I can tell you, if you're asking me, how the heck is this going to happen in the next 2 years? That's how. Turkey will make it happen. But there's some interesting things going on with Conor, and obviously he's been quite inactive. And a lot of people fault Conor for that, but I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I really don't fault Conor for that all that much. You see, he should have fought last December. It seemed like he was going to. And the UFC said, no, you're going to wait. It looked like he was going to fight April on UFC 300, and the UFC said no. So finally, they got the June 29 date. Obviously, McGregor training, gets hurt. And then it seemed like, okay, maybe they'll do something with the Sphere. No. Maybe they'll do 310. No. So the question is, who's the one saying no? And it's quite obviously the UFC. Now, why would the UFC say no? Conor McGregor's their biggest star. He has a lot to offer. And frankly, I mean, he can make the UFC a lot of money. So a lot of people ask why, and it all has to do with the broadcast deal. And not just the broadcast deal, but their extension with Conor McGregor. So the broadcast deal comes at the beginning of next year. And the numbers they're going to get for that broadcast deal could look different if Conor McGregor were to fight in December, say, and get, say, brutally knocked out by Michael Chandler. If that happened, whoever signed this deal with UFC is not as likely to sign for as much. And so Dana's saying, if we keep him out, then he doesn't have a recent knockout or something that's just looking at. And we can say, hey, you signed this deal for us, and early January or February, we've got a McGregor fight for you. The prices are going to go up, right? Quite obvious. And so then it's that, but it's also the McGregor extension. He's got 2 fights left on his deal. And McGregor said that before he got hurt for the June 29 fight, he made it sound like he wanted to fight June 29 and then late in the year, and then re-sign with the UFC. Now, obviously, he said many things since then. Multiple times said he would love to. Multiple times said he wants to go elsewhere. He says he wants to do bare knuckle and box and all these different things. So we're not going to sort through all those things and act like he even remembers what he said yesterday. And we're going to just take a step back and say, okay, what's the UFC looking at here? What the UFC is looking at is they're saying, hey, before you fight this second to last fight, we want you to re-sign with us. And until you do that, we're going to continue to push off this fight. There's no other reason the UFC would ever push off a Conor McGregor fight. It makes him too much money. And so they're telling Conor, you've got 2 fights left. We don't want it to get down to the last fight. And by the way, this isn't just me saying this. They've done this time and time before. We've seen this a lot in the UFC. 2 fights left, 1 fight left. They don't want to get to that last fight to re-sign you. If it's a guy like McGregor, they want to sign you when there's still 2 fights left or 1 fight left before you're out of fights. And so that's what they're trying to do here. They continue to push back these fights. And so that's why I think this fight with Jake will happen sooner rather than later, because I believe that Conor's going to get extremely frustrated and he's going to say, fine, I've waited, I've asked for many dates. He continued, just a headline the other day, I think at the Anthony Joshua fight, I'm waiting. He says, I want to fight, I'm waiting for that date. He's continued to say it, and I believe him. And the UFC's not willing to do it because they've got money at hand and they want to re-sign this guy. And I think he's going to get frustrated enough to the point. And by the way, McGregor loves the UFC. If he didn't love the UFC, he'd be long gone already. There's more money out there for him in boxing and other things. He'd be long gone. This guy grew up wanting to fight in the UFC, wanted to be a star of the UFC, wanted to make it to the UFC, made it to the UFC, wanted to become a double champ, became a double champ. And he wants to continue to climb that ladder in the UFC and see how big he can get. He's not done yet. But I think eventually he's going to get sick of it. And he's going to say, fine, I'm done. I'm taking a boxing fight. I'm taking something else. Too many of my peers, Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, right? Too many of these guys are doing big things while I sit here and wait for you to let me fight because you don't want me to fight because I've got 2 fights left. And so that's the reason I think it happens. I think Turki comes along with a lot of money, and Turki says, all right, we're going to make this happen. No more waiting for Dana. We're going to make it happen. And I think they make it happen. So, I think it's quite clear that Conor does want to fight. I talked about this. I think it's, like, as clear as it could possibly be. Seriously. It's quite clear. And it's frustrating as a fan because Conor's the guy that gets everybody up out of their seat and buying a pay-per-view and watching the sport. But I really think that's what we're looking at here is a situation where the TV deal and the extension is playing a major part in this, and I think Conor will get tired of it. And honestly, he knows he can't wait forever. He does. He knows he can't wait forever. He can't do it. He needs to be in there again. He's noticing that, oh my goodness, there's a lot of stars in the UFC right now, and honestly, they can survive without me. And he wants to get back, and he wants to be the guy that everyone's talking about. And honestly, in all these raging tweeting sessions and random interviews that he's doing, they're making less and less attention and headlines in the news because of that. And you better believe that frustrates him. And the last thing I want to talk about is this. They both have giant promotions. Conor's working with BKFC now. They both know Turki. And they're both looking for massive, massive fights. Conor wants to put on a massive fight. Jake wants to put on a massive fight. Jake will say yes in an instant, without a doubt. He's been trying to egg on Conor this whole time, trying to make him mad to get this fight. And he's been waiting for this. And I think it's coming to him. And I think it'll come very soon, actually. And so this is what it is. This is the headline that came out just today. Free the Mac. McGregor demands fight date amidst free agency talk. He's once again calling on the UFC to give him a fight date. That's what we've seen. And it goes on to talk about how it just came out that he is the most tested athlete by double the numbers. And he continues to pass these drug tests, and they still won't give him a fight day. He continues to ask. He's asking to free the Mac. And then it goes on to say, could Jake Paul be right? Is the UFC keeping McGregor locked up while they negotiate their new broadcast deal worth billions? And it certainly seems like that's what we're looking at here. Which is really unfortunate for McGregor. And then obviously just the latest news on this, it'll be that Friday night, the 15th, I think. Yeah, November 15th on AT&T. Tyson and Paul. but it gets bigger. And honestly, if he fights McGregor, that's the most respect he'll get. Yeah, McGregor in a boxing ring. I don't know what Mike Tyson's going to pose as a test, but McGregor would probably be the most respected. This isn't still a respected opponent. Everyone's saying, oh, he's too old. This is elder abuse. I can't believe you're doing this, Jake. But this is different. We've seen McGregor in a boxing ring with one of the best of all time, and he fought really well, actually. And so I think people would give Jake much more respect, and he knows that, which is why he's willing to take this fight. But they just need to find the promoter, which is Turki, and then they need to find a way to influence their promotions, which is all the different things, all the different endorsements that they want to highlight when they fight, and I think Turki will allow them to do that. And so because of that, that's why I think, and I'm saying this on September 24, 2024, that I think within the next 2 years, Conor McGregor and Jake Paul will fight. I'll come back to this when it happens, but I promise you, all the things are happening right. Conor's really frustrated with the UFC. Jake Joy's ready for the big fight, which is why it's going to happen. And I cannot wait to see it. But for now, I am Austin Ullman. And I thank you for joining me. And we will see you next time. I'm excited for the next video on here coming out. I'm going to talk about Alex Pereira and why he will be the greatest UFC fighter of all time. Obviously, Pereira Roundtree fight on October 5th. And so kind of what I'm going to do is take a look back at Pereira's career, what he's done, what I think he's going to do, and why in a matter of time we'll be calling him the greatest of all time. But until then, I'm Austin Ullman. I will see you next time.